Leave the angle.
All right, we're live.
We're on. Start the timer and...
Welcome to Get Justice with Scott Smith and Michael Morris. Today, we have a special guest star. He is not only one of my good friends, but he is a phenomenal trial lawyer who's been practicing for over 35 years. He holds more degrees in martial arts than I could ever imagine. Today we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to Mark, and that is people that have been the victim of sexual abuse, that have been the victim of violence, domestic violence as it is. Mark is going to have a lot of points to talk about because he not only represents people who have been involved in these types of situations, but he also teaches. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott. I'm really thrilled to be here. This is a fantastic opportunity, and I appreciate it.
Well, let's get started, Mike, because we need to hear from Mark about what it is Mark wants to talk about. You start, Mark.
You know, I'm very concerned about what's happening today with the sexual abuse. You know, we're hearing things with Marcy's Law. We're hearing things with the Harvey Weinstein issues. Right now, there's a criminal case pending against the doctor who abused all the gymnastic women over the years internationally. This is an ongoing problem that our society is not tackling properly, Scott. We really need to make people feel more comfortable in our system to speak up. First speak up, and then to stop these bad behaviors. Is it any big surprise all of a sudden people are saying, oh yeah, I wondered about that guy Weinstein in L.A., and apparently it was a well-known secret.
Well, apparently it's running rampant. Bill O'Reilly is another one, settling lawsuits for millions and millions of dollars because their conduct has been so egregious. You brought up Marcy's Law. Now that's coming up for vote, I believe, in the November elections. What is that, Mark?
It's the argument that we need better victims' rights to be passed in Ohio. The problem is, and it's certainly important, we can't let the criminal have more rights than the victim. That makes common sense to anybody in society. But the problem is we already have a law out there that's quite detailed that most people don't even know about. In fact, it's called the Victims' Crime Act. It's called Chapter 2930 for those who are interested in technical points. But it lays out, Scott, the victim's rights, and it's a very detailed analysis on what the prosecutors and the judges and all must do with victims. So that's something we need to be aware of. But the problem is, how do we stop this? How do we get the word out and make people feel more comfortable to speak out? You know, a lot of these, you brought up a great point, you know, they go into these settlement agreements, and you and I know well that as part of the deal, they want it to be secret, confidential. So then nobody knows. How are you going to protect people if it's all a secret? And then, or people file, you know, to protect their identity, they will file John Doe's or Jane Doe's. So those cases don't go anywhere. So we've got to get people to feel more comfortable to speak out. How do we do that? How do we get it so that you don't have, I mean, it's like a cockroach. You see one and underneath there's 10. I mean, all of a sudden one comes out, next thing you know, 10 people come out and say, this person's done this to me. How did that happen? It is our society's fault for letting this happen because we're a male-dominated society with laws that don't want women to speak up. And it's not that many decades ago where it was perfectly legal to abuse people or to hit people or consider women as chattel or property. And I think those are remnants that are still with us in 2017 that should not exist today. And we have to really be aggressive to fight for people's rights. I've been teaching women self-defense since I was 16.
We're going to get into that in a minute, but you make an excellent point, and I think I agree with you. Our society needs to change, our culture. And I think it starts in the home. I think it's the way we raise our children, for them to understand the rights of women and men, and to respect the rights of women and men. And if they're taught that way, and then they learn more of it in school, and our society does not put up with it, it'll stop. But right now, we've got the old school white guys like Harvey Weinstein and Bill O'Reilly and gentlemen like that in power who abuse their power. Because, as we all know, with power comes great responsibility, and these guys are abusing it.
You've hit the key, the power. It's a power thing. And now, if somebody's in power, they think they can get away with it. Nobody can speak up. And they're afraid whether, hey, I won't get a job, I'll be blacklisted. But you know, from your practice, and you're a stellar trial lawyer, we're in a time now where it's blame the victim for everything. Whether it's a car wreck and they're hit in the rear, somebody's going to say, gosh, they shouldn't have been in their car. To a woman who's attacked, and then what do they say? Well, why was she wearing what she wore? Why did she wear those high heels? Why was she wearing a low-cut blouse? All of a sudden attacking the woman when she's just doing what she wants to do in proper form. So we've got to get away from that. And that's where we need people to start standing up and saying, we're not going to take it anymore. Almost like that old movie, you know, they scream out the window, we're not going to take this anymore. We really have to be that loud and brash if we're going to make any progress in today's world. And here's the problem. People go through such societal denial and depression. I was talking to a person last night, coincidentally, who has amazing abuse, an incredible person, that is incomprehensible to me how she could be abused to that level. And what we need to do is realize, one, in Ohio, if you're attacked by intentional conduct, you know, assault and battery. Assault means, hey, they're almost going to hit you and you're afraid. Battery means they've actually touched you and you didn't want them to. You have 1 year to file a lawsuit. That's a very short time. By the time the person realizes what's happened to them and says, I've been abused here, I've been hurt, and figures it out and gets over the depression and the denial and the society trying to hold them back, that year could be up. And insurance doesn't cover, as you well know. If you get attacked, let's say a doctor. You and I have talked to victims of doctor abuse. And malpractice insurance probably is not going to cover that. So now you're trying to collect from somebody personally, and that's a very difficult thing because people file bankruptcy, they hide their assets, etc. So to even collect and try to get some fairness back to what they've gone through is very difficult. That 1 year goes fast.
That absolutely, Mark. You're on the ball on that. We talk about on this show quite a bit insurance, and big business insurance runs our society, and we wonder why the victims are getting blamed. Well, if you look at it from the top and you follow the money, you'll see insurance companies don't want to pay claims, and one of the things that I've always opined that they do is victim blaming, because if there is insurance that covers an act, whether it's a unintentional sex abuse, if there is such a thing, or negligent sex abuse, if there is such a thing, insurance companies are quick to say we don't cover it, or if they do cover it, to say it's the victim's fault. And it's just beyond me, and I know beyond you, because you and I have had many a conversation how this is unfair, and society has to rise up, and they have to say no. And what you and I do is get a verdict from a jury that is the voice of our community who says, no, stop, enough.
Well, you really hit, and I'm not surprised with your brilliance, you hit that key case in Delaware where there was abuse to a child, and it came out, everybody was going, wait a minute, there's a limit on what a person can get for pain and suffering when you're abused as a child, or multiple abuses. And that law, as you well know, discriminates against young children and older people who don't have economic losses but are abused. I mean, it's a tragedy in Ohio that we have a cap of $250,000, for example, for pain and suffering, regardless of how bad the pain is or how bad the suffering is, with no exception on some of these points. It's outrageous. No exception for mental distress. None.
It's beyond comprehension to me. Michael, you hear this about caps. What are your thoughts when you hear this?
I'm just sitting here kind of in shock because, one, I didn't know that there was no insurance that if a doctor, like, I'm kind of taking that part in. But the pain and suffering, to have caps on something like that, we've talked about the mental aspect of being injured, and that could take 10 to 20 years. Seeing a psychologist and all that, I had never heard that before. I'm amazed that there's a thing like that out there. One of my questions that I was going to ask you is, you had said when people kind of hold back on this and they only have a year to file. After the fact, what do they do? I mean, it's just done, right? So if there's abuse, if they don't speak up and report it right now, even if they did report it, there's $250,000 as the cap.
Well, Michael, you bring up a great point. The cap is on pain and suffering, which, if you don't have any economic losses per se, but you're mentally a mess because of the abuse, yes, it's a $250 to $350 max. So that's horrible. There are a few exceptions for, and it started with the priesthood abuse cases.
The one in Boston, is that the one?
Yeah, and Ohio has a law now that you have up to 30 years old to file those claims, where particularly young boys and then men started dealing with the crisis of what they went through when they were young boys and started realizing, hey, I was abused. So that statute was extended for that particular type of abuse in Ohio, thank goodness. Now, some states there is no time period. It's literally whenever you figure it out, you've got 2 years or 1 year, whatever it is, to bring the lawsuit. But the insurance is a big issue. You know, how do you collect against somebody who's a bad news person, who's hidden their assets, knows the game, has abused people because of their power, and then, of course, obviously denies it all? You know, when's the last time somebody said, yeah, I did all that, I need help, and I'm going to take care of everybody? It just doesn't happen.
Well, actually, yesterday, Bill O'Reilly was on Glenn Beck's show saying he was upset that they released that verdict of 32 or settlement. Mm-hmm. He was upset about that part, not saying did he do it or not.
Right.
He was upset about what had to be paid out. But he's still on a TV show talking about it, so his career hasn't stopped. That's the part where, in a medical situation, if you can't go after that person and they can hide their assets, they can just do this again and again.
Well, you hit it. That's the problem, and we need to stop it. And of course, when you see people like Bill O'Reilly get all these big bucks after they've just had this major case settle, what are we doing? We're reinforcing the notion that it's okay. Pay some money, have a secret deal, and that's okay. And unfortunately, Megan came out and said, "Well, I reported abuse. I saw it myself." And there are some of the people that are starting to come out, and it's going to have to be some of the heavy hitters, the headliners, hopefully the women that are in power are starting to say, no, this cannot go on.
But Scott had mentioned this, that it is a old boys, I don't want to just say white, but I know that's the way we kind of define it. Matt Damon and George Clooney were saying how they knew Weinstein was a bad guy. And they didn't mind being in his movies. It wasn't until all this came out that they had a problem with it. What I'm asking is there a way, like, who is supposed to stick up for those people that are being abused?
Well, that's one of our jobs.
That's us.
That is when people go to lawyers and they say, I never really liked lawyers till I had this problem, and now I need you. And it's ironic. We hear it all the time from people, Scott and I do, where I really don't believe in lawsuits. I don't really think lawyers are good, but my case is different, and I want to make a case. And here's why. How many times have we heard that, Scott?
More times than we can count, Mark. It's just the old adage, I don't like any lawyers. Lawyers are no good. But my lawyer's good because they get to know lawyers on a personal basis, and they see that lawyers, for the most part, across the board, will fight for you. Because if you don't have us, Michael, you don't really have anybody. And they're trying to take our rights away as lawyers to represent victims.
Well, you're the last line of defense, really, for anybody. I mean, once it goes past the police, a lawyer has to step in to protect you, right? I mean, without you two, I know that you're involved in many different cases other than what we're talking about today, but I'm amazed at the amount of things that, just as a regular citizen, that I don't know are on the books. I only heard of Marcy's Law because my daughter's actually friends with that person's daughter, the one that was burned by her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend or whatever. I hadn't paid attention to that case until we're driving in the car and she brought it up, and I thought, this is really horrible. And the more I'm looking into it, the fact that that can be pushed out or there can be changes made to it to protect the person that did it, I couldn't even believe that was possible.
Well, you bring up another great point, Michael, which is how do we, as frontline fighters, because we're really, I think, the warriors here. Scott's a warrior. I mean, amazing warrior, phenomenal record. We're the warriors that go out and fight for people. And the problem now is you can't get to court. And so one of the ways people realize, hey, wait a minute, maybe I can speak up, maybe I can have protection, is getting to trial. And now trials are really being far less than when we started 36 years ago. Far fewer trials, both in the federal court and state court. It's a huge problem nationally. So the few cases that go to trial, of course, are going to garner publicity, but that's just a few cases. So people are not learning about what's going on. Then you have the caps that reduce the verdicts unfairly. And then there's a horrible miscommunication of the verdicts themselves where most people think, the system's out of control. People are suing over all kinds of crazy stuff. That is what most people think. And we know that isn't even close to the fact. that is not even close to the truth, right, Scott?
Absolutely, Mark. Let's take a break for a minute.
Okay.
We'll return because I want to follow up with follow the money and sexual abuse.
Follow the money.
All right, so we'll just jump back in. I'll bring us back. Michael, do you want to bring us back? Or do you want me to
You're
do it?
good. You're
What's
good.
on your mind?
Well, I wanted to kind of talk about.
Sounded good.
I'd like to get into how you're teaching martial arts, that kind of background. But what I want to talk about is assault. We're seeing a lot more on the news where people are just attacking people. You know, the rally in the Charlottesville. I don't want to get into why they were there. It is, do you have a right to defend yourself? And I know it can be a gray area, but what I want to talk about is, I'd like you to talk about how you should prepare yourself in case, right? So there's a lot of people that are nuts out there. You should be prepared in case you need to. But also, what are the repercussions? How do you know what your rights are? If somebody's verbally abusing you and you turn around and punch them in the face, are you in the wrong? You know what I mean? Or what are you supposed to do?
Okay.
Because I feel like there's a lot of, everything we're seeing on the news is conflict sells commercials.
Yeah.
Okay. So the networks want to put that on TV. What I want to know is, what is your right as a citizen if somebody's harassing you, yelling in your face, that kind of thing? Somebody just got punched at I think it was an Eagles game. A guy just turned around and smashed him in the mouth. It was an older guy. He was sitting in his seat, and the guy just basically shattered his eye socket at a football game.
Yep.
Drunken sports fan. Or the Giants fans that beat up a Dodgers fan, or the Dodgers fans that beat up a few years ago.
Yeah, Giants fan.
In a coma.
Right.
Yeah, just because you're a fan of another team doesn't give somebody the right. Or the frozen beer can that was thrown by a Penn State fan, fraternity guy, and an Ohio State fan. They happen to be in the same fraternity. When the Ohio State chapter of Pi Kappa Alpha, which I was in, and the Penn State chapter of Pi Kappa Alpha, my little brother sent me the YouTube video and said, "Brotherly love, huh?" I'm like, no, that's awful.
At school.
All right, Jim, when you're ready.
Hold on 1 second. Do you want to talk about like the Penn State example of Paterno and the?
Well, there's going to be so much to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
We can get into it. I mean, what you just asked.
You just gave a loaded question.
Yeah, that we could
That's
talk
great
about that
stuff.
for
Great
days
stuff.
too. But it is an
Jason
example of all
Dusty,
the things.
Let's go into your rights.
Well, that's
Self-defense.
institutionalized.
And then maybe protection
haven't
ideas. So
come
we'll
back.
talk
Cover up.
about.
The only reason I thought of it was Penn State this weekend.
Yeah.
But
We could talk about Jerry Sandusky for forever.
yeah, I'm just saying.
And what a scumbag he
you got
is.
an institution that didn't know it was coming. There were people that reported it and it was ignored. That's all. But if we can go a different direction.
Well, I
Let's
think
talk
you
about
brought
sexual
up,
assault.
how should we protect ourselves physically? What's the rule? And then what are some good rules to save you and your family? I just wrote an article and it's published nationally on UDA and some things that I hope are basic to you all that you should be teaching and doing automatically wherever you go. I've learned it from the Israeli commandos and from the special forces. It's just stuff everybody should do automatically. We could talk a little bit.
Let's
about
get into that. Let's
All right. Well, I'll bring us back. I'll finish up what we're talking about because we're going to say follow the money, and then I'm going to turn the topic over to self-defense. What can victims do to not to be victims? And we can take off like on that.
Right.
You can get
We
into
got
Penn
11
State.
minutes. It'll go quick.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep. Welcome back to Get Justice with Scott Smith and Michael Morris. Today our guest star is Mark Kitrick. At the break, we talked about why this is happening. One issue, in my opinion, is it's happening that the victims are not getting their justice. They're not getting fair due in the court system is follow the money. When you look at, for instance, Penn State and the child abuse that was going on with those football players, it was institutionalized cover-up, in my opinion. And it took years upon years upon years for it to be divulged. And when it was, people went to jail, as they should. And Penn State paid money, as they should. Because if they knew, or should have known, this was going on, they had a responsibility. It happens across everything we do, everybody's job. There is that person in power. There is that almighty dollar they hold over your head that if you don't do what they want you to do, how they want you to do it, you may lose a job. Now, of course, they can tell you how to do your job. But if it goes outside the bounds of the job, there's a problem and there's abuse. Mark, I know you're heavy into martial arts, 10th degree black belt, and probably more than one, and I'm not sure, I can't keep up with you. I know you've trained special ops, Israeli commando training. What can a person do to avoid being a victim of sexual abuse or of violence?
Well, first of all, I agree 100% with everything you said about institutional tolerance that we're hopefully changing, not letting institutions say, well, we didn't know, turning the blind eye when we know they're all winking at each other and doing something inappropriate or letting things happen for the money. A couple things Michael brought up and you have brought up that are important. First of all, how much resistance can you have if somebody comes at you or tries to strike you or attack you? A couple of things. One is you cannot use more force than that which is coming at you. So, as I was saying earlier, if somebody just touches your shoulder, maybe inappropriately, you're not allowed to start smashing their head in, break their nose and break their eyes. So the violence back, of course you always want to avoid it and run if you can, but assuming you're stuck and you must react, must be equal to the violence that you perceive is happening to you. Now if you think, hey, I'm going to die if I don't fight, then you have every right to fight for your life. But you have to be defensive. You can't be offensive. I thought they were going to hit me, and so I smashed them instead.
You can't be proactive and guess that this person's giving me a bad look, so I'm going to throw them out the window.
That's correct. And even if they look at you funny, you can't say, I don't like the way they look. I'm going to hit their face so they can't look at me that way. But how do you avoid that? Well, if you don't really understand or know the person and you're getting a bad vibe, the one main rule I always teach people is to lift your arm straight up in front of you and let the person across from you lift their arm straight up. And when you do that, you've got about a 6-foot distance. That's called mai, M-E-I in Japanese culture. That is a safe zone. That is where they can't hit you. You know, they can't strike you. They may kick you, perhaps, if they're really good with their feet. That's the distance you should keep from someone you're not really sure where their head's at. You're not sure. Are they going to attack me? Are they dangerous? And if they move in on that mai, that 6-foot distance, you need to move immediately.
Move back or
you
move
need to move. You need to move away and off the line of attack. In other words, don't move in, don't move back. Because what if they're coming at you, big guys coming at you? Well, if you're moving back, you're just going to be a victim, to be attacked and be knocked on your back. You actually move off the line of attack to the side and keep that mai. In other words, always keep the mai, the 6-foot distance. If somebody comes in on that and you perceive they're really going to hurt you, that is an attack. They're now in the zone of danger where you need to deal with that attack and have every right to defend yourself so long as it's an equal force scenario. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, again, if they grab your wrist and maybe they just want to hold your wrist, you really can't kill them, snap their neck off. And it's very easy for anybody skilled to hurt or maim or kill somebody. I mean, you take out the eyeball, you break the eardrum, you take out the throat. It takes about 1/10 of a second. Now, you have 1/10 of a second to react to an attack once it happens. That's fast. So you don't want to be in that position. You want to protect yourself by not putting yourself in that position. And part of it is called UDA. And UDA is a very basic special forces, commando, all the military use this. It was started in the 30s by this famous military pilot who created this incredible organizational precept on, hey, how do I protect myself? UDA means observe. First, observe. Let's take the shooting in Vegas, which I just got done speaking about. First, you walk in a place, and here's the one thing I hope any of your audience gets, and all of you get, because this is what the commandos think about. You know, you walk in a room, airport, party, wherever it is. What's the first thing you need to do? Automatically, where is the nearest fire exit? And what person or thing is out of place? That's the first thing you better ask yourself from now on the rest of your life. Because that allows you to start studying and observing very carefully just by those quick questions. So you're not trying to remember 20 things. You start seeing that and you go, and you got to, of course, put it in the scenario. I mean, if somebody's in a hoodie and it's out on the pool and it's 100 degrees, something's not right. Unless maybe they have sun cancer. So you have to think through those things. But those are the first things you look at. Then orient means, and just jumping ahead, is you must figure out, that's the pregnant pause. All right, now what's happening here? What's going on, and what's my plan to survive? And then D is decision and act. Now, when you make decisions, you cannot fall prey to the herd instinct, which is what happens in Vegas and other places. People just start running for their lives. But were they really orienting themselves under stress to figure out where are the shots coming from and where do I hide? And cover and concealment is critical. You always want to take cover. You know what the difference is? Cover is getting behind an object that's impenetrable. a solid cement block, some major brick edifice, so that way if there's a gun, which you don't know what kind of gun it is, you don't know if it's a machine gun, an AR, etc., you're probably not going to get shot or killed, or a bomb. If you conceal, think about bushes, shrubs. Yeah, you might not be seen, but it isn't going to stop the bullet from killing you. So you always want to go cover. When you go in a bar, when you go in a restaurant, you try to get that seat with your back to the wall so you can see everything as well as you can, and you have the best quick exit. These are things you should automatically go. That way, if there is a problem or a fight or a terrorist or anything bad happening, you've put yourself in the best position possible to survive. And you think through that. People die because they're not prepared, they don't know what to do, and they don't know what their options are. And they shouldn't. And now some of these, I mean, what happened in Vegas is beyond incomprehensible. And these are the things that people need. ISIS, by the way, the top 2 ways ISIS for 25 years says they're going to kill us is random knife attacks and cars coming up on pedestrian walkways and killing you with a car. Have we not seen that lately? As a result, you should, when you walk with your family or friends, be thinking, when you're walking on the street, Main Street, USA, because we're all susceptible to attack, where can I quickly take cover and escape? So, to answer your question, no force more than what's necessary to survive, but keep yourself so you're safe at all times so you don't have to worry about it. You know, if you can run, you run. And the final point is it's run, hide, or fight. That's the analogy, or that's the actual way you must survive. You run if you can, you hide, cover, and then if you have to fight, it's surprise, force to survive, and you attack. You're going to have a better chance attacking directly a guy with a gun than a guy with a knife, because a total moron with a knife can just flip. You grab a person with their knife, and they just flip their wrist like that, it's hit your main artery, and you're in trouble. When people are under stress and they're going after a person with a gun, those people are not that accurate. So you've got a better shot, literally bad pun, of protecting yourself, going after and getting people to go with you. Don't let the bystander effect, this is a neurological problem. You know, you've heard how all these people getting raped and murdered and nobody does anything. 20 people are watching. How does this happen? We all think somebody else is going to do it. So if you're going to do it, you do it. And then say, hey, Scott, I need you. Hey, Michael, I need you. And you get in there and do it like they did on the jet when the Twin Towers went down. You just got to get people, put them together, and attack. I hope that makes some sense. These are some basic rules. I hope that you all get to follow.
Mark, that is phenomenal. I'm sure that the listeners have been enthralled with what you have to say because it's interesting. You have me riveted and trying to understand what we should do. And those are very basic and very wonderful goals.
This might be our most intense show.
Yeah,
we've done.
We could have gotten more intense, but our time has run out. So, Mark, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
You for the privilege.
Michael, always thanking you for co-hosting with me. Mark Kitrick is a trial lawyer in Columbus, Ohio. If you don't call me, call him.
Oh, I thought you were going to do okay, hey, we'll see you next week.
I can do that. You move back on to it?
Yeah,
I mean, if you want to.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah,
okay, because it sounded like it just boom.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Just make sure you get to Get Justice.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, that wraps it up for Get Justice with Scott Smith and Michael Morris. Stay tuned Sunday, QFM 96 at 8 a.m.
Okay.
Quick and easy.
Did you like it?
When you're dealing with a professional.
I felt like you were getting revved up, and then we were running out of time, and I was like...
We could talk for days about so many topics.
Well, that topic was perfect, because as it was going, I was like...